All right, so we've been talking about the Republic, Roman Republic, and last time we were talking about the Punic Wars. Rome expands from the city of Rome throughout the peninsula, which puts them in contact with the Greeks. It also puts them in contact then with the Carthaginians. We have 3 Punic Wars. There are also 3 Macedonian Wars, where they will conquer the Greeks. As a result of this, one of the things I think I mentioned last time is that the Romans were very good imitators, right? They were very good at taking somebody else's ideas and borrowing it, plagiarizing it, but sometimes sort of giving it their own spin. So if we think about the late Roman Republic, we can think about the cultural influences of the Greeks. So, the Romans are influenced by the Etruscans. They're also heavily influenced by the Greeks. And a lot of this can be traced back to their conquering of Greece. So, we might say that militarily the Romans conquered the Greeks. But culturally, Greek culture basically conquers Roman culture, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. They borrow the religion, they borrow the literature, they borrow the artwork, and so on. Well, how does that happen? One of the ways that happens is after the wars with the the Romans really respected the Greek culture, Greek religion, Greek authors, and so forth. And so once the Macedonian Wars had taken place and a lot of Greek prisoners of war, you might call them, people captured during this fight with the Greeks. Romans, one of the big part of their culture is slavery. And so when they would capture some of these Greeks, some of them were highly educated and had actually served as tutors, paraclete, right? Somebody that comes alongside. There's a whole culture in Greek ideology, Greek education, that a young person would have an older person assigned to them, or maybe a group of them, and then that person would be their teacher, their tutor, their companion, sort of like their nanny, their babysitter, and their teacher. All right? So they made sure the student got ready for the day, made sure they did their lessons, made sure they did whatever it was they were supposed to do. Well, the Greek, when the Greeks are conquered, we see that then a slave, would be quite common to have a educated Greek slave become the tutor for Roman children, especially of the wealthy, obviously, Romans. So this has an interesting impact because, the Romans already had a lot of respect, I guess you'd say, and some knowledge of Greek ideas. But what this did is really expose the Romans to Greek culture, Greek language to some extent, but one of the things these tutors often did was translated the Greek writings into Latin, so that they could have the Latin students read it, study it, learn their Latin language as well. Okay? All right, so I just wanted to look at a few cultural things like this, one of which, of course, is religion. The Romans borrowed almost wholesale Greek gods. The Romans had their gods. Some of their gods were somewhat similar to the Greek gods, and, for example, a god of the storm, lightning, that sort of thing. Jupiter. But of course, Jupiter somewhat similar to Zeus. And so what happens is the Romans basically borrow the mythology of Zeus and apply it to Jupiter. Okay, does that make sense? So they say, oh, well, and you can see how they say, oh, this is our god of sort of weather, our supreme god of weather and thunder and that kind of thing. Well, yeah, the Greeks have one. And the Greek stories are more elaborate than our stories, but it's really the same guy, the same God. So we conflate it. We put the two together, and they don't see any problem with that. Okay, so then I put Jupiter equals Zeus. So maybe I should put Zeus equals Jupiter, because a lot of the things ascribed to Zeus are then attributed to Jupiter. Especially a lot of the stories about him. And of course, Jupiter had a lady, a consort, if we want to use a more proper term. Her name was Juno, by the way. Juno then is similar to Hera, Zeus's main woman, main wife, main consort. The god of war for the Greeks is Ares, and for the Romans is Mars. So a lot of that's put together. The goddess of love, Aphrodite, and for the Romans, Venus. So, there's a lot more we could say there, but, for example, even sometimes the names get transferred. If you read the Bible, and I recommend you do someday, you will find that Paul goes to a town called Athens, which is in Greece. When he gets there, he speaks to an interesting group called the Areopagus. Any idea what the Areopagus was in Athens?
Sounds like a temple for Ares.
A temple? Well, yeah, sort of the city of Ares, right? Areopagus, correct? It actually was a kind of group that they met. They had a certain location where they met. And there is a place you can go to if you ever go to Athens. Anybody here been to Athens? I hope you get to go someday. When I take students there, which I have in the past, and when I've been there, I always go to the Areopagus just for fun. It's right near the Parthenon. And I don't know what that was. It's right near the Parthenon, and it's a hill. It's an outcrop of rock, bare. And if you remember in Acts, Paul gives a speech, or he gives I guess you'd call it a speech, a discourse, a sermon, perhaps you might call it, in Acts, what is it, Acts 17? Is that what it is, Acts 17? I think you have to look it up, you can see that. And there he speaks to the Areopagus. So, was it up on that hill? The hill's an outcrop right near the Acropolis. So we always go to the Acropolis. Everybody always goes to the Acropolis, right? And once you go to the Acropolis, then what I try to get them to do for my groups is drop us at the Acropolis. We go to the Acropolis, then we walk over to the Areopagus, or Mars Hill, as it's sometimes called. So Areopagus really means the hill of Mars, or hill of Ares. And then we go up there, and we think about what Paul did. And then we leave there and we walk on around, and we actually walk down the hill into the marketplace, or the Agora. And you can enter because you've got the ticket that you had to get up on the Acropolis is the same ticket it is to get down into the Agora. And then you walk through the Agora, and you can see all kinds of buildings and temples and things that are there. And then you end up down at the bottom of the hill. Well, this is the Plaka, which is the hopping place in Athens to eat lunch and stuff. It has all kinds of shopping and all the kinds of stuff that other people like that, I mean, I like to eat, but the shopping part's not my favorite. But some people like that kind of thing. So we end up down there. So you start in the morning at the Areopagus, you know, the Acropolis, you go through the Forum, the Agora, then you eat, say, lunch, a late lunch down there, and then from there you go do something else. Well, Paul meets there. Now, the Areopagus was really a group of philosophers, and they had a special meeting place. It was up on that hill, but most people believe that by the time of Paul, it might have actually been down in the Forum or the Agora. So there we see that. Mars Hill is often mentioned, say, in the Bible. Certainly the old King James called it Mars Hill. This is the Areopagus. All right, a lot more we could say there, but let's move on. Philosophy, as we said, the Areopagus was a meeting place, a group of philosophers. And there was certain philosophy, Greek philosophy, especially the philosophy of the Hellenistic period, which becomes very popular in the Roman times, such as Epicureanism. Any idea what Epicureanism is about? You studied it anywhere else? They might talk about it in a New Testament class or something. I don't know. Do we have philosophy classes here? I've not heard much about them. We must have them somewhere, don't we? Somebody must teach it. Of course, this is ancient philosophy, so probably maybe doesn't make the list unless there's a specific course on ancient philosophy or Greek philosophy. Epicurean. You ever heard that word? Sometimes it's used in a sentence like this. Oh, it was an Epicurean delight. They might say, we went to this special restaurant that was filled with Epicurean delights. So that kind of confuses it, doesn't it? The Epicureans follow the teachings of Epicurus. And Epicurus was an interesting guy who basically said the main goal of philosophy or of your life should be to avoid pain. So, you know, he never knew about Demerol, otherwise he probably would have been a fan. But to avoid pain and to live a life that was pain-free. Now, he means not only physical pain, but emotional pain, you know, all that kind of stuff. Because basically his idea was it's better to not have pain than to have pain in the general sense. So therefore you should seek to have a life that is painless. So the lack of pain would then, or the opposite of pain would be pleasure. So you want to avoid pain, you might want to seek pleasure. So this is what he's famous for. I think maybe sometimes over-exaggerated, but he said, seek pleasure, avoid pain. So an Epicurean delight is usually used today of some kind of, well, I guess what I would call fancy food. Fancy food and drink that, you know, people, well, you know, you guys are hipsters, so you know what I'm talking about. The hipsters, you know, they don't want to, they would only go to McDonald's in an ironic way because, you know, it's so bad that I want to go there. But I'm going there fully well knowing that it's bad. But I want to experience it. So I can take a picture of myself on Instagram at a McDonald's showing that I am aware, but these other poor souls at McDonald's don't know how ironic I'm being. Okay? But anyway, we have this kind of stuff now. They're like fancy. You know, here's the thing. Here's how I know it's really a hipster kind of special restaurant is when I drive by it, I don't know it's a restaurant. It'll have another kind of name. It'll be like, it'll just have like 21 or something. Or it'll be like or it'll just say the patio, or I don't know. We've got some here in Lakeland. And we drive by and I see this place and I don't know what it is. It seems to be something. But in my opinion, you know, if they won't tell me what it is up front, I'm not going in. But that's exactly what they want, because they don't want my kind there. So, you know, that's how you know. That's how you know. If it's got like a weird sort of atmosphere and we don't really know what it is, and then you get there and someone will start to use words like artisanal and what do they call, what's the other one? Locally based, artisanal, free range, gluten-free, vegan, I don't know, whatever, okay? And there's supposed to be really fancy food, certainly very expensive food, and it's supposed to taste just amazing. Just amazing. We don't use regular oil. We get like oil from, I don't know, Amazonian goldfish or some sort of thing. Okay? This is the kind of people that would like to have their coffee having been processed through a small mammal. You heard about this kind of coffee? It's supposed to be the most exclusive coffee. It's from down in like Central America someplace, where they actually feed coffee beans to like a little weasel or something, and the weasel can't digest it completely. And so, well, it's not a biology class, but you know that the coffee bean then comes out of the weasel. Then you just take that and like grind it up and make coffee out of it. It's like, you know, $400 an ounce or something. It's supposed to be just amazing because it has the weasel enzymes have matured the coffee bean. Well, this is an Epicurean delight. So he's seeking pleasure. That pleasure might come from food. The pleasure might come from drink, usually alcohol, which has its own characteristics. Also, you know, you might seek pleasure in other ways, which are not SEU approved. Most of this stuff I'm talking about is not SEU approved. And so Epicurus then gets the reputation as being a kind of guy who promoted living a lifestyle that would not be SEU approved. The Romans loved it, by the way. They loved that kind of thing. And so Epicureanism, which was a Hellenistic philosophy, becomes a big Roman one. A guy named Lucretius is the guy who promotes that. So it's about hedone. Have you heard of hedone? Is Greek for sweetness. Sweetness, and that's where we get our word hedonism, which means sweetness or pleasure seeking is hedonism, that kind of thing. All right? All right. Stoicism. What is Stoicism? What's Stoic? Anybody know? Yes.
It's where you try to not let anything bother you.
Try to not let anything bother you. Yeah, I try to do that every day. Taylor, how about you? You were going to add something to that?
Accept things.
Accept things. No, I don't accept them, but I try not to let them, what'd you say, bother me. Well, yeah, a Stoic, okay, I used, you know, this might work with this crowd, I don't know. I would say that it was sort of like being like Mr. Spock. Do you know who Mr. Spock is? Leonard Nimoy. He's my Mr. Spock, although he got a new Spock now. You know, I don't know if he's going to be back, but yeah, I forgot his name. Zach something, right?
Yeah.
Zach something. Zach Galifianakis. No, that's not the one. It's a different Zach. Anyway, so Spock, you know how Spock is. He's half human and he's half Vulcan. So you know what that means. He's got troubles. Because he wants to control his emotions, because he has those because of his mother. But his father's side, you know, the Vulcan side, wants him to control it. So he has that kind of struggle that sometimes you can sense with Spock, that, you know, he's trying to really control his emotions and it's made harder because he's half human. So this is what a Stoic would want to do: control their emotions. Try not to let things bother them. So what this would mean is that they would be neither happy nor sad. They should want to be very even. So if you told them they won like $10 million in the lottery, nothing. Tell them their mother died, nothing. This is their goal. They have no reaction of pain or to control the emotions, because otherwise the emotions will control you. So it's about control. So this is Stoicism. It gets its name from the Greek word stoa. Anybody know what a stoa is? Stoa? Stoa is a building that's often found in an agora. It's a Greek name for a long colonnaded building that was usually used for shops and things like that. They got that name because that's where they would meet. They would meet in Athens, down in that agora I told you about, that I walk students through. And in fact, John D. Rockefeller, you ever heard of that guy? Well, you should. This guy got around, right? John D. Rockefeller ended up bankrolling the excavation translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. And John D. Rockefeller built a museum in Jerusalem, which is called what? The Rockefeller Museum. Imagine that. And it's a very nice museum, and it's been there for a long time, and it used to be the museum of Palestine. I mean, it's still a very nice museum. Now there's a more modern museum in the west side of Jerusalem. But Rockefeller not only did this stuff in Palestine, Israel, but he paid, like you're saying over there in, where was it? Albania, that the government wants to go in and basically move people out so they can do it. This is what John D. Rockefeller bankrolled in Athens. There was a train station and all kinds of houses, usually kind of small houses. John D. Rockefeller bankrolled the idea that they bought that whole thing, all that land, they moved those people elsewhere, they tore down those houses, and they began to excavate. And so that agora area was all purchased by him. Another thing he paid for is the founding of what's called the American Classical League, or organization that teaches classics and so forth. And they have a museum, and they built a building in the shape of one of the famous Stoa, the Stoa in the Agora of Athens. So when you go to Athens someday, as I hope you will, you're going to see this really nice building with all these colonnades and a nice roof on it, double stories, and you're going to go in there and you're going to find it's a long museum. That was all paid for by John D. Rockefeller. Now, in that area there was more than one Stoa, but one of the Stoas had, and of course Stoa means porch. It has a porch because of the colonnades. The idea was you'd build a building, you'd make a covered walkway with those columns and a roof. So it was a covered porch or walkway so that you could walk along in the shade and do your shopping and things. So this is where the Stoic philosophers would come to hang out, at the porch. The Painted Porch was a famous place. It was a porch that had a painting up on the inside of the wall, and that's just where they would meet. And so they came to be known as those guys who would meet on the porch, those porchites, those porchers, whatever. The Stoa, the Stoics, okay? So the guys that meet in the Stoa. Famous Stoic was Seneca. And here is a statue of Seneca, so you get an idea maybe what he looked like. He is the tutor of a guy by the name of Nero, that I'm sure you've heard of. And Seneca, in the early years of Nero's reign, Nero wasn't quite so crazy. Well, maybe he was crazy. But it was people like Nero who he sort of ran things for him. Between Seneca and Nero's mother, they kind of kept the young emperor in line. Later on, the young emperor didn't like that. So you're going to find that both of those two people are dead later on. He ordered the death of his own mother. That's an interesting story we might get to later. And of course, Seneca was persuaded to commit suicide as well. That's the end of him. Now we go to 1150? So we're about out of time. You got a question? Had your hand up.
I'll ask.
Well, we still got 2 minutes.
And how did, was it, who was the predecessor to Nero? Or Nero?
Nero?
Yeah.
Well, you've got Caligula, you've got Claudius. Yeah, so you start with Augustus and you have Tiberius. After Tiberius, then you have Nero. All right, well, we'll go over that stuff later. Don't forget to look at the assignments and maybe even do them. Be thinking about your paper, because that's going to help you if you get a topic now to work on it.